Hey everybody, so in this video we're going to look at dividing complex numbers. Um, in order to get into doing that, we're first going to have to look at finding the conjugate, which is a really useful tool that will help us in division. So the conjugate isn't too hard at all, it's just a case of remembering it when the time comes for you to sit your exam. So let's say we have a complex number z, and it can be whatever you want. Let's say it's 4 plus 6i. So we have a real part and we have an imaginary part. All that we do to find the conjugate of this complex number is rewrite it, put a little bar over it, and the bar symbolizes the fact that this is a conjugate of z. So it's not a normal z, it's its conjugate. We rewrite the real number normally, then we just change the sign when we're writing out the imaginary part of that complex number. So z was 4 plus 6i, but now to find the conjugate, we change it so it's 4 minus 6i. Again, we leave the real number the same, and we just change the sign of the imaginary number. Let's look at another example now. This time we will say that we're looking at the complex number y. So we can say that y is minus 2 minus 3i. So if we want to find the conjugate of y, we'll get y, put a little bar over it. This shows we're finding the conjugate. We keep the real part the same, so that's going to be minus 2. We change the sign of the imaginary part of this complex number. So the conjugate of y is minus 2 plus 3i. Again, the important thing is changing the sign of the imaginary part. Okay, so now we'll look at an example where we actually have to divide a complex number. So we've been asked to divide minus 1 minus I by minus 2 minus 2i. So you can see that on the top of the bottom here, there's a complex number for each. So the first step when dividing complex numbers is to find the conjugate of the bottom, or the denominator. If you don't remember, the numerator is on top, the denominator is the name of the bottom of a fraction. So we're going to find the conjugate of the bottom number. So the conjugate of the bottom number, or the denominator, is going to be minus 2 plus 2i. Again, all we've done here is change the sign of the imaginary part of that complex number. So we kept minus 2 the same, we changed the sign here. We don't worry about the top, we're just finding the conjugate of the bottom number, or the denominator as it's called. Now the next step is to multiply the top and bottom of this fraction by the conjugate that we've just found. So we'll rewrite this, minus 1 minus I. I'm going to multiply the top by that conjugate, which is minus 2 plus 2i. And we're also going to multiply the bottom. So minus 2 minus 2i is going to be multiplied by our conjugate as well. Now once we've got this done, all that's left to do is multiply this whole thing out, multiply the top out, multiply the bottom out, and simplify. So as we go through this, you'll see why we multiply by the conjugate, because once we multiply these out and simplify, we'll get rid of a lot of the complicated stuff on the bottom of the fraction. Okay, so let's get multiplying now. We're going to break up the first bracket on the top and break up the first bracket on the bottom. So minus 1 times minus 2 plus 2i minus I times minus 2 plus 2i. The bottom, we're going to break up the first bracket too. So it's going to be minus 2 times minus 2 plus 2i minus 2i times minus 2 plus 2i. Again, we broke up the first bracket for the top and bottom. and then we wrote out the second bracket twice. So if you're not sure about what I did there, just go back and look at the multiplying complex numbers video. So when we simplify this out then, or multiply it out, on the top we're going to end up with 2 minus 2i plus 2i minus 2i squared. On the bottom we're going to end up with 4 minus 4i plus 4i minus 4i squared. Now we should remember from our multiplying complex numbers video that I squared is going to simplify to being minus 1. So our next step will be rewrite the whole fraction. We're going to change just that little section there. So just put a little box around this fraction here because it was getting harder to tell the difference between each fraction and the one above it. So we took the I squareds and we subbed them in for minus 1. So that happened on the top and on the bottom. So we can redo the fraction now. We're going to then just multiply these out, multiply out the brackets to simplify. So the top will change to 2 minus 2i plus 2i. Then a minus times a minus is going to give us plus 2. The bottom is going to change to 4 minus 4i plus 4i. And a minus times a minus is going to give us plus 4 there. So now what we have on the top and bottom of each of these is some real numbers and some complex numbers, or imaginary numbers, sorry. So we're going to group the real numbers on top, group the real numbers on bottom. So the real numbers on top is 2 and plus 2. The imaginary numbers on the top is minus 2i and plus 2i. On the bottom, the real numbers are 4 and plus 4. The imaginary numbers are minus 4i and plus 4i. When we add the real numbers on top, we're going to get 2 plus 2 is 4. The imaginary numbers, minus 2i plus 2i, cancel out. On the bottom, when we add the real numbers, we get 8. And minus 4i plus 4i actually cancel out. So we get 4 over 8 as our answer, or that simplifies to a half. So a lot of this was just simplifying, but just to go back to the initial steps, the main one was to find the conjugate of the bottom number, which we call the denominator, and then multiply the top by that conjugate and multiply the bottom by the conjugate. After that point then, it was really just a case of simplifying everything step by step and just being careful not to make any mistakes, to make as few mistakes as possible.